Hello and welcome to Tech Deal's how-to guide, how to upgrade your CPU for better performance and install a liquid cooler so we can overclock this CPU and get great performance. This computer is 6 years old. This is an i7-2600K CPU. We will be replacing it with this i7-2600K CPU. We will also be replacing this Intel stock cooler with this Corsair H60 120mm liquid cooler. Now the purpose of this video is to go step by step to show you how we're going to install the backplate, replace this cooler, replace the CPU, replace the back fan, put this in so that we can have a higher performance machine. First things first, system prep. Now I'm going to set the H60 box aside here. The first thing we need to do is to prep the system. Now, looking inside here, mind the cable management, it is a 6-year-old computer. You can see the CPU here, and then you can see the cables plugged in all the way around. I am going to have to disconnect and move a few things, and the reason is these older cases often do not provide access to the back of the motherboard. A modern case actually has a cutout behind the motherboard to provide you easy access to install this, which is the back plate, which is what the liquid cooler screws into. There is no access here, so we actually are going to have to unscrew the motherboard and lift it up in order to get the back plate behind it. Before we do that, however, we need to prep our system. Now there is a 120mm exhaust fan right here. I'm going to remove it. There is also a small expansion card right here, which I will also have to remove. I've already taken the graphics card out earlier, and we'll need to disconnect one or two other cables. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my screwdriver and I'm going to remove the existing cooler, the existing fan I should say, from the back of the case. Always make sure to hold it with your hands so it doesn't fall down and crash into everything. Now this is going to be plugged into the motherboard, so we need to gently pull up on that and disconnect the fan. We are not going to reuse this. I'll keep it for maybe an older system, but we'll set that aside. And then the next thing I need to do is make sure that all of my add-in cards, graphics cards, etc. are removed. And I'll pull that out and just set that aside. Now that I have the fan and the cards out of the way, now I'm going to remove the existing CPU cooler. The Intel stock coolers have a small wedge here that you can put a flathead, not a Phillips head screwdriver, but a flathead screwdriver into and turn each of these 1/4 turn, 90 degrees, and it will unlock each of the 4 posts. At which point you can pull up on these, there we go, and it releases the stock cooler. And now it should come right off the motherboard. And then we just disconnect it, and then we're done. For those of you curious, this is what the thermal paste looks like after it's been applied. When stock coolers come, they come with, either a stripe or a block of thermal paste in the center. You can see how applying the stock cooler has spread it around. Thermal paste is a one-time use item. We can no longer put this down, and well, you can, but you shouldn't. You should always clean that off with a clean cotton swab, clean this off, and reapply new thermal paste. But we're not worried about it because we're not reusing that. Now, if you ever do need thermal paste, this is what I recommend, Arctic Silver 5. These are about $5 per tube, and this tube will last you for many, many installations. It does not take a lot of thermal paste. It is basically the size of a grain of rice. Maybe at most 2 grains of rice. It is just a small daub in the middle. Don't overdo it. Too much thermal paste is the biggest mistake you can make when applying a new cooler. Now we don't need the Arctic Silver 5 because thermal paste comes pre-applied on the new cooler. In fact, every cooler I've ever bought always comes with thermal paste pre-applied. That's actually a very, very thin layer, even though it looks like a lot. So we won't be needing any extra thermal paste for this installation. So while I'm removing this CPU, I'm still going to take a Q-tip and I'm still going to clean the thermal paste off. Oh, that's interesting. That's dried up. And this does happen over time. This is 6 years old, and I can rub it off, but it's no longer very smooth. This thermal paste is old. If you have an older machine and it's running hot and you're having trouble with performance or it's throttling, yeah, that's old and caked. You may actually want to remove your cooler and apply new thermal paste if your machine, yeah, that is just absolutely solid there. Normally this should be runny, this should be smooth, but that is not. If you do end up with a little bit of dried thermal paste, that's what compressed air is for. I'm just going to use some compressed air. Yep. There we go. There were a few bits in there, and I actually saw them fly out the back. So we got rid of all the thermal paste. At this point, it's time to actually remove our CPU. This lever here goes down, off to the right, and up. This removes this metal bracket, which is actually holding the CPU down. This gets lifted up just like so. The CPU has no pins on the motherboard. The pins are actually on the motherboard. There's nothing inserted. So to remove the CPU, simply grasp it by the two edges here and lift it straight up, just like so. If you look on the bottom of the CPU, it's flat. If I can hold it up there, so the camera, there we go. There are no pins on the CPU. The pins are on the socket on the motherboard. I'm now going to set my CPU aside, and I'm going to take my new i7-2600K CPU. For those of you curious where I got this, and now here we have our new i7-2600K CPU. For those of you curious where this came from, eBay. There'll be a link in the video description below for this, but eBay is a great source for old used CPUs. I paid just over $120-ish plus shipping for this. It is a little bit more expensive than maybe you'd expect a 6-year-old CPU to be, but this is going to provide us with additional threads and great performance for this machine. Now, I could have overclocked the other CPU. I could have put the liquid cooler on the i5-2500K, but the other purpose of this is it gives me a comparison to the i7-7700K. I'm going to be doing performance comparisons with this machine with the new 7th generation chips. 5 generations apart, how much performance do you get? Now, to install the CPU, look on the socket. Don't touch it with your hands because those are pins right there. There's a notch here on the top and a notch there. And if you look on the socket, there is a notch here and a notch here. So the CPU only goes in one way. You don't push it down, you just set it into place. There we go. That's how you install a new CPU. It's really that simple. It's not that hard. It's all about being gentle, making sure you have everything lined up, and just being very careful because those pins on the board are very fragile, and if one gets damaged, the board's useless. At this point, we want to bring this cover back down, and one thing you want to make sure is these two tabs here are actually going to go under this mounting post on the board. These two tabs here on the side actually hold the CPU down on the integrated heat spreader. When we bring this down, this will require some force. This is not, I hate using the word force in computers, but this does require some force. I'm pushing down, I'm pushing down, I'm pushing down, and locked into place. That's it. Our CPU's installed. How easy was that? To be honest, that is by far the easy part of this process. The hard part of this process now is going to be putting the back plate so these 4 holes have these 4 posts going through it. Now, in order to make myself some room and so I don't damage it, I'm actually going to remove the left 2 RAM sticks just because they're right next to where we're going to be mounting. And so I just push down on the tabs, and I'm just going to pull the RAM sticks out and set those aside. Now I'm going to take my screwdriver and I'm going to remove all the screws from the motherboard. Now, if you are in a computer case that provides access to the back of the motherboard, this step is not required. Unfortunately, this old Thermaltake case does not provide access to the back of the board. So, I have to remove the board. Thankfully, magnetic screwdrivers make this so much easier. If you work on computers on a regular basis, that is worth its weight in gold. Well, maybe not its weight in gold, but it's certainly worth having. I have dropped too many screws onto boards, which you really shouldn't do. There we go. There are between 6 and 9 screws on your motherboard, depending upon the size, type, brand, age, etc. And so now I have all of the screws out. The motherboard is now loose and can now be lifted up. Now, depending upon your case and situation, you may need to disconnect the ATX power cable and or your data cables in order to get behind the board. I am going to try to get this under and push it up through those holes without disconnecting everything. We'll see how this works. And here we are with the 4 posts mounted and the back plate behind it. Now I had to trim a bunch of that out because this was much harder to get out than I thought it might be. If I had it to do over again, I might disconnect more of it. I ended up having to take it out and tilt it this way and come this side. I thought I was going to tilt it up this way and come in from this side, but these cables didn't want to move very far. How you handle this is going to be a very specific situation to you. I got it in there. I got the board back into place. This is one of those things where you are going to have to customize the installation to your specific situation. Ideally, your case has access to the back of the motherboard. There'll be a cutout behind here. You can take off the back panel of your case, and this is a non-issue for you. But this is an older case back before things like liquid coolers and back plates were common, so it is what it is. And there we go. All the screws are in place, and the motherboard is now securely in place. At this point, I need to reattach the few cables that I had disconnected previously. There's that there. I'm going to take my USB 3 adapter and I'm going to reinsert it down here. Now I am not going to reinstall my RAM until after I have the cooler in place. It just gives me more room to install it. The RAM is easy enough to put back in just a minute. Here is our cooler, water block, and radiator. Now the radiator is going to be here. However, there is a fan that actually attaches here. Screws will go through these holes and into the mounting point on the radiator. This is square, and so you can install this in any of the 4 directions. It is worth noting, before you install it, take a look at your power cable coming off the fan and think about how you want it routed. You don't want it coming here towards the graphics card if your plug is on the top of the board. You don't want it on the top of the board if you're going to plug it down here. So think about where you're going to install this before you orient it. Furthermore, you want to give some thought to your hoses. If you install this way, for example, the hoses might not twist very well. They might be blocking. In this case, I'm probably going to install it like this because it puts the hoses at the bottom and it gives me some options for how I want to turn the actual water block itself. Now, while the water block has a logo on it, it doesn't have to be installed in that orientation. This top bracket is going to come on top of the block here. And if you look, it's square. So we can actually install the water block in any of the 4 configurations. Further note, these posts that we mounted on the board before, now it is loose, that's normal. I don't know if you can see that, but it is loose, that's fine. When we screw on these thumb screws, the posts will come through these holes and we'll screw down all 4 of them using these thumb screws. It will be very tight once it's installed. So at this point, you kind of sort of have to go, okay, I want to put this here and I want to put this here. Or do you want the hoses coming here and bending around? Play around with it because your case is going to be different than mine and where you want to mount it will be different, most likely, than what I'm doing. I now have the fan installed here with 2 of the long posts like this running through it on the top to hold it in place. It's not actually screwed into anything, but I'm just holding it into place. And I have it plugged into the motherboard here. I've actually got the cable wrapped around the fan, coming across here. No need to tie it off. It's going to stay securely in place and not touch anything. There's no looseness here at all. The cooler is then going to be attached to this with the hoses on the bottom, and then I will need to use my screwdriver to actually mount this into place. So here's our cooler, which I'm just going to rest the water block here to keep it out of the way. I am going to take my screwdriver over here, putting it onto the first screw, and then I'm going to hold the water block into place while I screw that in. And now that's, well, secure enough. I'll put the other one in to make sure that it's not going to drip down. Remember to use the washers to make sure that you have a secure mount. I'm going to put the bottom 2 screws in now. And then go around to all 4 corners and tighten it up. Now don't over tighten or you'll strip the threads on the radiator, which you don't want to do. That'll render it kind of useless. This is now securely in place. That's not going anywhere. Very important point. The fan can be mounted either direction to blow air out or to suck air in. Right now, it is sucking air in and blowing it through the radiator. So cool air from the outside will blow through the radiator and into the case. Now, I've done this both ways in previous builds. Frankly, it doesn't make a huge difference either way. This has been tested by many other tech reviewers who have done this far longer than I have, and the short and long version is, it is a very, very minor difference. Whether you have it in a suck or a blow configuration depends partly on what else is in the case. What other fans do you have? How large is your case? Is it mounted in the back? Is it mounted in the front? Is it mounted on the top? If it's mounted in the back and you have an intake fan on the front and your power supply is mounted on the top like this is, and it has a big 140 millimeter fan which will suck air in and blow it out the back, having this blow in creates additional positive pressure in the case, allowing this to blow the heat out the back. There's also vents on the top even though there's no fans. If your power supply is mounted on the bottom, sucking air in from the bottom, then it's isolated from your case. At which point, if you have an intake here and you make this an intake, there's no exhaust fan. Now, if you have vents on the top, air will find its way out, but heat will accumulate until it rises and vents naturally. If you can mount an exhaust fan on the top of your case, or better yet, two fans, then mounting both of these as intakes and then exhaust out the top is probably ideal. If you can't mount exhaust fans on the top of your case and you have an intake here, then I would suggest making this an exhaust fan, because then intake and exhaust. The idea is to create balanced airflow, a similar number of intake and exhausts. We have a 120 millimeter here, 120 millimeter here, and this power supply has a 140 millimeter fan. So 2 intakes, 1 fan exhausting, plus of course the natural ventilation out the top. At this point, we're going to take our CPU water block. Now, I do have the middle frame installed. Make a note of where this is, just keep it out of the way for the time being. There is a plastic protective cover. Once you remove that, be very, very careful because the thermal paste is pre-applied, and if you touch it with your fingers or mess it up, well, you can't really redo it without having more thermal paste. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure I have these handy. There we go, I have all the screws handy. This is the part where timing is an issue, because once you push it down, you don't want to take it off again. We're going to take this plastic cover off now, so that our thermal paste is now exposed. At this point, once I push this down on the CPU, I want to hold it down. Positive. You know what? It's important to remember to take the plastic protective covering off that. My mistake. There's a piece of plastic that's covering the actual water block. Take that off for better heat dissipation. Once we put this down, hold it down and don't let go. Don't lift up, push down, lift up, push down. Biggest mistake you can make. Once this is pushed into place on the CPU, you're committed. And there we go, it's down. So now I'm going to hold that there, and I'm going to take these thumb screws, and I'm going to carefully screw that into place. I may actually use my screwdriver. These do have screw holes on the end of it. I was going to use my screwdriver. These are too heavy. My magnetic screwdriver would not hold that. So we're very carefully, and of course I dropped it. This is honestly by far the hardest part of doing it. Now I've got the 2 corners in. There we go. Now I can put the others on. When you screw these on, don't use too much force. It really doesn't require tons and tons of force. Make sure to screw down in a cross pattern. Get it tight, but not tight. Maybe loose is a better term. So I'm actually not tightening any of them until I get them all on. And then I'm doing a bit on each corner. And I'm just going around and I'm just screwing it a few times on each side until it gets firmly in place. And when I say firmly, firm is a relative term. Do not use power tools in your computer. This is just manual hand pressure. Don't get carried away. You can damage the board, damage the screws. And there we go. Our new CPU is in place. Our liquid cooler is in place. It is mounted with our radiator fan blowing in. Do make sure to connect the power to the pump. this needs to connect preferably to the CPU power connector on the motherboard, so the motherboard knows that there is in fact something connected to cool the CPU. Many motherboards will not allow you to boot if you don't have something plugged into the CPU power connector. So if you hook all this up, turn the computer on, and nothing happens, double check that the pump is plugged into the CPU power connector, because while it will work plugged into a case fan connector, many boards will not boot without something plugged into the CPU fan connector on the motherboard. And the last step is to reinstall the RAM that I previously removed. And we are complete. We are all finished, ready to reinstall the graphics card, which wasn't here before and I won't show you now, but I had taken it out for ease. This concludes the how-to guide on how to upgrade your CPU and how to replace your Intel stock cooler with a nice 120mm liquid cooler. Following this video is going to be a setup and overclocking video. I'm going to see if I can get this up into the 4.5 gigahertz range. With this cooler, maybe, maybe not. Maybe 4 to 4.2 is all I can do, but we'll find out. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with the big huge red button directly below this video. Questions and comments in the comment section. As always, check out the video description below. A link to support me on Patreon is down there. If you like this video, if you find my how-to guides, performance guides, build guides helpful, if you like my channel, $1, $5, anything you can contribute is greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Furthermore, links to Amazon, Newegg, and eBay will be down there as well. Now, this CPU I bought off of eBay, and eBay is a great source for this type of thing. Go check my links out down below if you find this video helpful. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I will see you next time.